The Valdés mansion rose from the hillside like a monument to excess, its white stone facade gleaming under carefully placed lights that never seemed to turn off. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city below, a glittering sea of movement and life that never quite reached the house itself. Inside, everything shone: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings framed in gold, but the air carried a strange stillness, as if the walls had learned long ago how to hold their breath. People said the house never slept, yet it felt perpetually exhausted. During the day, the staff moved through its corridors with practiced precision, footsteps soft, voices lower than necessary. At night, the mansion became something else entirely. The lights dimmed automatically. The hallways stretched longer. Shadows pooled in corners that had no right to be dark. And at exactly 2 o'clock every morning, without fail, the silence shattered. A child cried. Not loudly. Not in the way children cried when they scraped a knee or demanded attention. This sound was quieter, broken, as though someone were trying very hard not to be heard and failing anyway. It drifted from the west wing, curling through the corridors like a question no one wanted to answer. The first time it happened, years ago, several maids had rushed toward the sound. One never came back the next day. Another packed her bags before dawn. After that, rules were quietly established without ever being written down. The west wing was off limits after sunset. Doors stayed closed. Ears stayed deaf. If you heard it, you didn't acknowledge it. If you acknowledged it, you didn't stay long. Eduardo Valdés never addressed it. His name alone carried weight. Billionaire by 40. Visionary, according to business magazines. Predator, according to his competitors. He was rarely seen in the mansion except in passing: tailored suits, immaculate posture, eyes always fixed forward as if looking at something far beyond the walls that sheltered him. He spoke little to the staff and even less about his personal life. His authority didn't come from raised voices or threats. It came from silence, from the understanding that he noticed everything and forgave nothing. People whispered that he was ruthless in the boardroom, that he crushed men twice his age without blinking. They whispered other things too, softer, darker things, but never within the house. The mansion had ears, and everyone knew it. Ana Morales arrived on a rainy Monday evening with a small suitcase and a letter of employment folded carefully in her pocket. She stood at the service entrance for a long moment before ringing the bell, water soaking through her thin shoes, her shoulders tense as though she expected the house itself to reject her. She had learned, over the past year, that grief made a person quiet in ways others often misunderstood. Ana was in her early 30s, though loss had etched years into her face that no mirror could erase. She wore her dark hair pulled back, her uniform too large from a previous owner, her movements deliberate and unobtrusive. She spoke when spoken to. She listened more than she talked. That habit had kept her afloat since the night her husband didn't come home and the world she knew folded in on itself. The head housekeeper showed her around briskly, listing rules without meeting her eyes. Your duties are the east corridors and the lower floors. You will finish by midnight. You do not go into the west wing. Ana nodded. She always nodded. Survival had taught her when to ask questions and when not to. Her first shift passed in a blur of polished surfaces and echoing rooms. The mansion seemed to stretch endlessly, each space more extravagant than the last, yet strangely unused. Bedrooms untouched. Sitting rooms staged like museum displays. Everything pristine. Nothing warm. By the time Ana finished mopping the last hallway, her arms ached and her thoughts drifted, until the clock in the corridor chimed softly. 2. She was reaching for her cart when the sound reached her. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then she realized it was coming from inside the house. A thin, trembling sound, rising and falling unevenly, as though the walls themselves were breathing in pain. A child was crying. Ana froze. The sound slipped under her skin instantly, bypassing reason and caution. It wasn't loud enough to be accidental. It wasn't dramatic enough to be fake. It was the kind of cry that came from someone who believed no one was coming. She waited for someone else to react. For a door to open. For footsteps. For a voice calling a name. Nothing happened. The mansion remained still, indifferent. Anna's chest tightened. She didn't move closer. She didn't move away. She simply stood there, mop forgotten, heart pounding, listening to a loneliness so profound it felt familiar. Somewhere deep in the West Wing, a child cried on the hour. Anna did not sleep that night. The crying followed her even after it stopped, lingering in her ears like an echo that refused to fade. It wasn't the sound itself that unsettled her most, it was the way the mansion had absorbed it without reaction, like a body long accustomed to pain. By morning, she told herself it had been exhaustion, imagination amplified by an unfamiliar place. Grief had a way of distorting silence. But when the second night came, the house proved her wrong. Anna was cleaning the lower corridor just before midnight when she noticed something strange. The air shifted. Not colder, not warmer, heavier. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere above her, a door closed softly, deliberately. She glanced at the clock mounted near the servants' stairwell. 1:58 a.m. Her fingers tightened around the cloth in her hand. At exactly 2 o'clock, the crying began again. This time, it was closer. Anna felt it in her chest before she truly heard it, a tight, breathless sound that rose and fell unevenly, as if the child were trying not to cry and failing anyway. There was panic in it now, threaded through the sorrow, a sharp edge of fear that made her skin prickle. She looked around instinctively, expecting someone to appear, to tell her to ignore it, to order her away. The corridor was empty. The doors remained closed. The mansion watched her in silence. Against her better judgment, Anna followed the sound. She moved slowly, each step deliberate, her shoes whispering against the marble floor. The closer she got to the West Wing, the more oppressive the space became. The lights here were dimmer, the walls darker, the paintings older, faces in gilded frames staring down at her with expressions that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The crying stopped suddenly. Anna halted, heart racing. Then came a sound far worse than tears. A soft knock. 3 faint taps, uneven, hesitant, coming from behind one of the closed doors. Her breath caught in her throat. "Hello?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Silence. She reached out, her hand hovering inches from the door, when a voice, small, hoarse, trembling, spoke from the other side. "Please, don't go." The words pierced her. Anna pressed her palm against the wood, feeling the faint vibration of someone leaning on the other side. "I'm here," she said, her voice barely steady. "I'm not going anywhere." There was a long pause, then a shuddering breath. The door did not open. "My father doesn't like noise," the voice said. "But I can't stop." Anna closed her eyes. Something inside her broke open quietly. "What's your name?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mateo," the child whispered. She waited, but nothing more came. No footsteps. No adult voice telling her to step away. Just the sound of a boy breathing too fast, like someone afraid that even air was a luxury he wasn't allowed. "Mateo," Anna repeated gently. "I'm Anna. I clean the house." "You're not supposed to be here," he said. There was no accusation in his tone, only fear, as if he were worried for her. "I know," she replied. "But sometimes rules are wrong." On the other side of the door, something shifted. She imagined a thin boy sitting on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, listening for danger in every sound. "They pretend I'm sleeping," Mateo said. "They tell visitors I'm away." Anna felt a chill creep up her spine. "Away where?" "I don't know." His voice cracked. "I don't think they know either." Footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, slow, measured, unmistakably adult. Mateo gasped. "You have to go. If he sees you." The footsteps stopped. Anna stepped back instinctively just as the hallway lights brightened. At the far end of the corridor stood a tall man in a dark suit, his silhouette sharp against the glow behind him. He didn't look toward the door. He didn't need to. His presence alone felt like a warning. Eduardo Valdés. His gaze swept the hallway once, cold and assessing, before settling on Anna. There was no surprise in his eyes. Only calculation. "You're working late," he said. "Yes, sir," Anna replied, her voice calm despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. His eyes flicked briefly to the door behind her. For a fraction of a second, so brief she almost missed it, something tightened in his expression. Not anger. Not guilt. Fear. "Finish your duties," Eduardo said evenly. "And stay where you're assigned." Anna nodded. As she walked away, she felt it, the unmistakable certainty that she had crossed an invisible line. Behind the closed door, a child held his breath. And somewhere within the walls of the mansion, a secret stirred, no longer content to remain buried. By the third night, Anna understood something the others had learned long ago and never spoken aloud: the mansion followed its own rules after dark. She had been careful all day, meticulous in her work, invisible in the way Eduardo Valdés seemed to prefer. He passed her once in the main corridor, his presence precise and controlled, his gaze sliding over her as if she were part of the architecture. But Anna noticed everything: the faint tremor in his jaw when the West Wing was mentioned during a phone call, the way his steps slowed almost imperceptibly as he passed the sealed corridor, the way the house itself seemed to tense when he was near. She also noticed the cameras. There were none in the West Wing. That realization settled in her chest like a warning bell. At 1:40 a.m., Anna finished her assigned floor and pretended to return her cart to storage. Instead, she waited. She stood in the shadow of the service stairwell, counting her breaths, listening to the mansion's low mechanical hum. Somewhere above her, something shifted, fabric against floor, a soft thud, the sound of a child pacing in a small space. At 1:59 a.m., the lights dimmed. At 2 a.m., the crying began. This time, it was different. It wasn't just sorrow. It was desperation, ragged, uneven, the kind of crying that came when someone was running out of strength. Anna felt it like a hand closing around her throat. She moved before fear could argue her into stillness. The West Wing corridor greeted her like a mouth-swallowing sound. The air smelled faintly of dust and antiseptic, an odd combination that made her stomach tighten. As she passed one of the tall windows, lightning flashed in the distance, briefly illuminating the hallway, and for a split second, she saw something that made her stop cold. Handprints. Small ones. They were faint, almost invisible unless the light struck them just right, smudged into the glass at a height no adult would reach. Anna lifted her own hand and placed it beside one. The size difference was unmistakable. A child had stood there once. Pressed against the glass. Waiting. The crying came from farther down the hall now, behind a different door than before. "Mateo," Anna whispered as she approached. The crying stopped abruptly, like a sound cut by a blade. There was a long, terrifying silence. Then a lock clicked. The door opened no more than an inch. Anna caught a glimpse of an eye, dark, rimmed red, far too alert for a child who should have been asleep. A thin hand gripped the edge of the door as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. "You came back," Mateo whispered. "Yes," Anna said softly. "I told you I would." He hesitated, then opened the door just enough for her to see inside. The room was sparse to the point of cruelty. No toys. No color. Just a narrow bed with white sheets, a small desk, and a single lamp bolted to the wall. The windows were locked. The curtains too heavy for a child to move alone. It's smaller than the other room, Anna said carefully. Mateo nodded. I get moved when I cry too much. The words hit her harder than any shout could have. Who moves you? She asked. Mateo shrugged, the motion brittle. Sometimes the man with the keys. Sometimes my father. Anna's breath caught. He comes in here. Mateo shook his head. No. He stands in the doorway. He doesn't like to be close. Lightning thundered outside, and the boy flinched violently, scrambling backward onto the bed. Anna stepped inside without thinking, closing the door gently behind her. No, Mateo whispered, panic flooding his face. If they see. They won't, she said, though she had no idea if that was true. I'll be quick. She crouched in front of him, lowering herself until they were eye level. Up close, she could see how thin he was, how his wrists disappeared into the sleeves of his pajamas, how carefully he held himself, like someone afraid of taking up too much space. Why do you cry every night? She asked. Mateo swallowed. His gaze drifted to the ceiling, then to the door, then back to her. Because if I stop, he said slowly, they forget I'm here. Anna felt something fracture deep inside her chest. They already tried once, he continued, his voice barely more than breath. They said I was a mistake. That mistakes get erased. A sudden noise echoed from the corridor, footsteps, firm and deliberate. Mateo's eyes went wide with terror. Anna stood, heart pounding, and positioned herself between the boy and the door just as the handle began to turn. The lock resisted. On the other side, a man's voice spoke calmly, dangerously so. Ana Morales, Eduardo Valdés said. Open the door. Mateo clutched her uniform with trembling fingers. In that moment, Ana understood something with terrifying clarity. The crying was not a weakness. It was resistance. And the house had never slept because it had been listening all along, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to answer. By the fourth night, the mansion no longer felt like a place Anna worked in. It felt like a living organism that had noticed her presence and was deciding what to do about it. She sensed it in the way doors closed a second too late after she passed, in the cameras that now seemed to pivot just slightly when she entered certain corridors. Someone was watching more closely. Someone had realized the silence had been disturbed. Anna kept her head down during the day, her movements precise, her expression neutral. She answered when spoken to, smiled when required, and avoided the West Wing entirely while the sun was up. Yet beneath that practiced calm, her thoughts were locked on one thing, the boy behind the door. Mateo. She replayed his words over and over, each one lodging deeper than the last. They forget I'm here. Mistakes get erased. These were not the fears of a spoiled child. They were the beliefs of someone who had been taught, carefully and repeatedly, that his existence was conditional. That night, the mansion seemed to brace itself. At 1:30 a.m., a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder rattled the windows, and rain lashed against the glass with violent insistence. The lights flickered twice, once in the east wing, once in the west, before stabilizing. Anna paused in the servants' corridor, her cleaning cart beside her, listening. She heard it before 2 o'clock. Not crying. Breathing. Shallow. Rapid. Panicked. It threaded through the ventilation system, faint but unmistakable, like someone trapped underwater. Anna abandoned her cart without hesitation and moved, her footsteps silent against the marble as she followed the sound. The west wing door was unlocked. That alone sent a jolt of fear through her. She pushed it open slowly, wincing at the soft creak of hinges that sounded too loud in the stillness. The corridor beyond was darker than usual, emergency lights casting long shadows that distorted the walls. The portraits lining the hallway seemed to watch her more intently tonight, their painted eyes accusing, complicit. Mateo, she whispered. A soft sound answered her. Not words. A whimper, muffled, coming from behind a door she hadn't seen before, smaller, almost hidden between two larger rooms, its handle scratched and worn. Anna reached it just as thunder cracked overhead. The door was locked. "Mateo," she said again, louder now, fear creeping into her voice. "It's me." "Anna." No answer. She pressed her ear to the wood. On the other side, she heard something that made her blood run cold, a rhythmic tapping, irregular and frantic, like fingers striking the wall again and again. She knocked once. "Open the door." "Nothing." "Anna." His voice finally came, thin and strained, as if it had traveled a long way to reach her. "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "They changed the lock," he whispered. "It's the quiet lock." Anna's stomach dropped. "The quiet lock?" "It doesn't make noise when it opens," Mateo said. "So no one hears." Before she could respond, the tapping stopped. So did the breathing. "Mateo?" Anna hissed. Silence. The kind that presses in on your ears until you're sure something terrible has already happened. Anna rattled the handle. "Mateo, answer me." A soft click echoed behind her. She turned slowly. Eduardo Valdés stood at the end of the corridor, one hand resting casually in his pocket, the other holding a small keyring that glinted under the emergency lights. His expression was calm, almost bored, as though he had expected to find her there. "You're persistent," he said mildly. Anna straightened, placing herself squarely in front of the door. "He's not well," she said. "He's frightened." Eduardo's gaze flicked briefly to the door, then back to her face. "Fear is a learned behavior. So is cruelty," Anna replied before she could stop herself. The air shifted. Eduardo took a step forward, and suddenly the corridor felt much smaller. "You forget your position," he said quietly. "No," Anna said, her voice shaking but steady. "I remember it very clearly. I clean up messes other people don't want to see." Something darkened in his eyes. Not rage, calculation. "You think you understand what's happening here," Eduardo said. "You don't." "Then explain it to me," Anna challenged. "Explain why a child cries every night like he's trying to prove he's alive." Eduardo was silent for a long moment. Thunder rolled again, shaking the walls. Somewhere deep in the mansion, an alarm chimed softly and then stopped. "He is fragile," Eduardo said at last. "And fragile things break easily." Anna felt the words like a slap. "You're not protecting him," she said. "You're erasing him." Eduardo stepped closer. "Everything in this house exists because I allow it to." A small sound came from behind the door. Not crying. A cough. Weak. Uncontrolled. Anna didn't think. She acted. She lunged for the keyring. Eduardo reacted instantly, grabbing her wrist, his grip iron hard. Pain shot up her arm, but she didn't cry out. She twisted, using her body weight, years of carrying grief and labor giving her strength she didn't know she still had. The keys fell, clattering across the marble floor. Time froze. Mateo coughed again, louder this time, desperate. Anna wrenched free, snatched the keys, and fumbled at the lock. Her hands shook so badly she dropped them once, twice, before finally finding the right one. The door swung open. Mateo lay curled on the floor, his face pale, lips tinged blue, his small chest struggling for air. His eyes fluttered open when he saw her. "Anna," he whispered, relief flooding his face even as his body betrayed him. She dropped to her knees beside him, gathering him gently into her arms. "I've got you," she murmured. "I've got you." Eduardo stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the scene as if it were something unreal, something that should not exist. For the first time, his composure cracked. And in that fracture, Anna saw it clearly, not just fear, but guilt so deep it had turned poisonous. Mateo's breathing slowly steadied against her chest. The mansion, for once, was completely silent. And in that silence, something irreversible had just begun. The fifth night arrived wrapped in a false calm, the kind that settles in only after something has been irrevocably disturbed. Mateo had been moved. Anna knew it the moment she stepped into the mansion and felt the imbalance, like furniture shifted in a dark room. The staff avoided her eyes more than usual. The head housekeeper spoke to her in clipped sentences and reassigned her routes twice in 1 hour. Cameras that had once been dormant now blinked red in corners that had never held them before. And the West Wing. The West Wing had been sealed. A heavy iron bar crossed the entrance doors, newly installed, its metal still smelling faintly of oil. A printed notice was taped to the wall beside it. Restricted area. Authorized personnel only. Anna read it twice, her jaw tightening. Mateo had not cried the night before. That fact frightened her more than all the nights he had. She moved through her shift mechanically, wiping surfaces already spotless, emptying bins that held nothing but air. Her mind replayed the image of him curled on the floor, his breath shallow, his body too light in her arms. The way Eduardo had watched, not with concern, but with the panic of a man whose secret had almost slipped out of reach. At 1:47 a.m., the power flickered. Not the whole house. Just the West Wing. Anna felt it like a pulse. She abandoned her cart and took the servant's stairwell 2 steps at a time, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. The iron bar was still in place, but the door beside it, a narrow service entrance masked as a storage closet, stood slightly ajar. She slipped through. The air inside the West Wing was colder than before, sharper, tinged with something metallic. Emergency lights glowed dimly along the floor, casting the hallway in a sickly amber hue. The portraits were gone. Bare rectangles marked where they had once hung, the walls beneath them lighter, unscarred by time. Someone had erased history in a hurry. Anna, a voice whispered. She spun. Mateo stood at the far end of the corridor, barefoot, dressed in oversized pajamas that dragged along the floor. His face was pale, but his eyes were wide and alert, burning with a strange urgency. "They're packing," he said. "Packing what?" she asked, moving toward him. "Me," he replied simply. "And everything that proves I was here." Her stomach dropped. "Where are they taking you?" Mateo shook his head. "Someplace quiet. He says it's better if no one remembers." A door opened somewhere behind them. Anna grabbed Mateo's hand and pulled him into the nearest room, closing the door silently behind them. The space they entered was unlike any room she had seen in the mansion. It was smaller, hidden, the walls unfinished. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating shelves stacked with boxes, folders, and sealed envelopes. Mateo stared at them, his breath hitching. "This is it," he whispered. "This is where they keep me." Anna reached for the nearest folder and opened it. Her hands began to shake. Inside were medical records. Ultrasound images. A hospital discharge form stamped in red. Stillborn. She flipped through the pages frantically, her heart hammering harder with every word. A death certificate. A signed affidavit. Legal correspondence marked confidential. Mateo Valdés. Declared deceased at birth. Anna's vision blurred. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from making a sound. "That's my name," Mateo said softly. "But they said it doesn't count." Anna dropped to her knees in front of him. "Mateo, how long have you known?" "I heard them talking," he said. "They said it was easier. That people forgive sadness, but not mistakes." A memory slammed into place. The woman who sang to him. The promises. The hidden rooms. "Your mother," Anna said carefully. "What happened to her?" Mateo's face tightened. "She wanted to take me away. She said we'd have sunlight and noise and names that weren't whispered. He swallowed. Then she disappeared. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, multiple this time. Voices murmured, sharp and efficient. "They're coming," Mateo whispered. Anna's mind raced. She grabbed a stack of documents, shoving them into her uniform pockets, tucking others into her waistband, anywhere they would fit. She scanned the room desperately and noticed something she had missed before, a second door at the back, almost invisible, its outline carved into the wall. She pushed it open. Inside was a child's bedroom frozen in time. A small bed. Faded drawings taped to the walls. A stuffed animal missing one eye. Dust lay thick on everything, untouched for years, as if the room itself had been declared dead. "This was yours," Anna said, her voice breaking. Mateo nodded. "Before I cried too much." The door behind them rattled. "Ana Morales," Eduardo's voice called, calm but edged with steel. "You are exceeding your role." Ana stepped forward, positioning herself between Mateo and the door. Her hands shook, but her resolve did not. "You killed him on paper," she said loudly. "But he's alive. And I have proof." The door flew open. Eduardo stood there, flanked by two men in dark suits. His gaze dropped to the documents bulging from Anna's uniform, then to Mateo, standing barefoot in the dust of a room he was never meant to return to. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Eduardo smiled. Not kindly. Not warmly. "Anna," he said, "you have no idea what kind of war you just started." Mateo tightened his grip on her hand. And in that moment, Anna understood the truth with terrifying clarity. The crying had never been the danger. Being heard was. The sixth night did not wait for darkness. It began in the afternoon, under chandeliers and sunlight, with silence so heavy it felt staged. Eduardo Valdés canceled every meeting. The boardroom emptied. The phones stopped ringing. For the first time since Anna had entered the mansion, the house was not preparing for business, it was preparing for containment. Mateo was gone when Anna checked the hidden room. Not moved. Not sleeping. Gone. The bed was stripped. The drawings removed. Even the dust had been wiped clean, as if someone had scrubbed the past itself from the walls. Panic rose fast and sharp, but Anna forced it down. Panic made mistakes. She needed clarity. She found it in the basement. The lowest level of the mansion was not on any map given to staff. It was accessed through an unmarked elevator behind a false linen wall. Anna discovered it by accident, or perhaps because the house had decided she was ready, when she noticed a draft where no vent should have been. The elevator had no buttons. Only a key slot. Eduardo's key. Anna waited until nightfall. At 11:53 p.m., the mansion lights dimmed one by one, plunging rooms into shadow in a sequence that felt deliberate, ritualistic. Security guards rotated positions. Cameras realigned. Somewhere in the walls, gears hummed. Anna moved. She slipped through the servants' corridors, timing her steps between camera sweeps, her breath shallow, her mind sharp with a terrifying calm. She reached Eduardo's study just as he left it, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and precise. "By morning," he said, "this will no longer be a problem." Anna waited until his footsteps faded. Then she entered. Eduardo's study smelled of leather, paper, and something else, sterile, clinical. On his desk lay a single key, separated from the rest, as if already chosen. Anna took it. The elevator descended without sound. The doors opened onto a corridor bathed in white light so bright it hurt to look at. The walls were smooth, seamless, more hospital than home. And at the far end, glass. Behind it lay a small room. Mateo sat inside. He was dressed neatly now, hair combed, hands folded in his lap like a child waiting for inspection. Electrodes dotted his temples. A thin bracelet circled his wrist, blinking softly. His eyes lifted when he saw her, widening in disbelief. "Anna," he whispered through the glass. She ran to him, pressing her palm against the barrier. "I'm here. I'm here." He stood, shaky but determined, mirroring her gesture. "They said if I stayed quiet, I could keep my name." Her chest tightened painfully. "What are they doing to you?" Mateo hesitated. "They're fixing me." Footsteps sounded behind her. Eduardo entered the corridor calmly, as if he had expected this moment all along. He wore no jacket now, no mask of public composure. Only resolve. "You shouldn't have come down here," he said. Anna turned slowly. "You built a prison under your own house." Eduardo glanced at Mateo, his expression unreadable. "I built a solution." "You're drugging him," she said. "Monitoring him. Erasing him piece by piece." "He cries," Eduardo snapped suddenly, the control cracking at last. "Every night. Do you know what that does? To a man who has spent his life ensuring nothing breaks." Anna stepped closer to the glass. "He cries because you taught him silence equals survival." Eduardo's jaw clenched. "You don't understand the stakes." "No," Anna said. "You don't understand humanity." Mateo's voice trembled. "Father, am I sick?" Eduardo closed his eyes for a moment. That was all the answer Mateo needed. Something in the boy shifted then, not fear, not sadness, but clarity. He reached up and tore one of the electrodes from his skin. Alarms began to chirp softly, like nervous birds. "I don't want to be fixed," Mateo said, his voice gaining strength. "I want to be real." Eduardo lunged for the control panel. Anna moved faster. She slammed her hand onto the emergency release. The glass wall slid open with a hiss. Mateo stumbled forward into her arms, and she caught him, holding him tightly as alarms blared, lights flashing red now, no longer pretending this was anything but a crisis. Security voices crackled over intercoms. Footsteps thundered above. Eduardo stared at them, something wild and broken in his eyes. "If he leaves this house," he said quietly, "everything collapses." Anna met his gaze without flinching. "Then it should." She wrapped her coat around Mateo, shielding him, and turned toward the elevator as guards flooded the corridor. Mateo clung to her, whispering urgently, "Anna, if they ask. I exist, right?" She kissed his hair, tears burning her eyes. "You exist," she said fiercely. "And the world is about to hear you." The elevator doors began to close. Eduardo stood frozen in the white corridor, surrounded by the consequences of his own design. And for the first time since the mansion had been built, the house screamed. Not with crying, but with alarms. With truth. With something finally breaking free. Morning came without permission. The mansion did not wake gradually the way ordinary houses did. It jolted awake, sirens silenced, lights snapped off, staff summoned with clipped messages that said nothing and meant everything. By the time the sun crested the hill, news vans were already lining the gates, their satellite dishes pointed like accusing fingers toward the white stone walls. Anna watched from the back seat of a black car as the estate receded behind them. Mateo sat beside her, wrapped in her coat, small fingers threaded tightly through hers as if the world might vanish if he let go. He had not slept. Neither had she. But something in him was different now, an alertness that wasn't fear, a quiet steadiness born from having crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. "You won't take me back," he said softly. It wasn't a question. Anna squeezed his hand. "Never." At the police headquarters, the air smelled of coffee and old paper. Anna laid the documents on the table one by one, death certificate, affidavits, medical records stamped with lies so official they had nearly erased a living boy. The officer's expressions shifted as the truth assembled itself piece by piece, no longer deniable, no longer containable. And then came the final document. Anna hesitated before placing it down. This one was different. Thinner. Older. Its edges were worn, as if it had been handled often, clutched in moments of desperation. She slid it across the table. A handwritten letter. Addressed not to Eduardo Valdés, but to a journalist who had died under suspicious circumstances 8 years earlier. The room went very quiet. Anna's voice held steady as she spoke. Mateo's mother didn't disappear. She tried to expose what Eduardo did. She documented everything: false records, bribed doctors, coerced signatures. She hid copies in the house. I found them. Mateo looked up at her, eyes wide. She tried to save me. Yes, Anna said gently. She never stopped. By noon, Eduardo Valdés was no longer unreachable. He stood at a podium in a glass-walled conference room, cameras flashing, reporters pressing forward like a tide that had waited years to break. He looked immaculate, tailored suit, composed posture, but something in him had collapsed inward. The certainty. The invincibility. My name is Eduardo Valdés, he began, voice steady. And everything you think you know about my family is false. Gasps rippled through the room. He spoke of mistakes first, then decisions, then finally, when the words could no longer hold, crimes. The stillbirth that was not a stillbirth. The child who was hidden to preserve an image. The woman silenced by contracts and threats until silence consumed her. And then came the revelation no one expected. There is one more thing, Eduardo said, his voice faltering for the first time. My son's crying, it was not what haunted me. The room leaned in. It was the proof that he survived me. Across the city, Anna watched the broadcast on a small television in a quiet office. Mateo stood beside her, eyes fixed on the screen, face unreadable. Eduardo continued, I told myself control was protection. That erasure was mercy. I was wrong. The words landed hollow, too late. By evening, Eduardo Valdés had resigned from every position he held. Charges were filed. Investigations opened like wounds that had waited years for air. The mansion was seized. The West Wing, once sealed, was photographed, catalogued, exposed to daylight for the first time in a decade. That night, Anna and Mateo stayed in a small apartment provided by social services. It was modest. Warm. The walls were thin, the floors imperfect. Mateo stood in the doorway of his room, uncertain. What if I cry again, he asked. Anna knelt in front of him. Then I'll hear you. He nodded, absorbing that truth slowly, as if it were a new language. Later, as he slept, Anna sat on the edge of the bed and watched his chest rise and fall. No alarms. No locks. Just breath. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from the case officer, there's something you should know. Attached was a scanned document uncovered that afternoon during a deeper audit of the records Anna had taken. A revised birth certificate. Filed 6 months after Mateo was declared dead. Mother, listed as deceased. Father, left blank. Under notes, a single line had been added in a different hand. Child placed under private guardianship per request of the mother. Anna's heart pounded. Mateo's mother had outmaneuvered Eduardo once. She had ensured her son was hidden, but alive. She had bought him time. Anna closed her eyes, tears spilling freely now. The crying had never been a mystery. It had been a signal. A child refusing to vanish. A truth knocking every night at exactly 2 a.m. A house that never slept because it was guarding a secret it could no longer contain. Mateo stirred, then sighed, turning onto his side. He did not cry. For the first time in years, the night passed in silence, not the silence of fear, but the quiet of safety. And somewhere far away, behind locked doors and shattered reputations, Eduardo Valdés finally lay awake, haunted not by sound, but by the absence of it.